Hey everyone, Livy here, back with another video. Today's video is going to be hopefully a bit quick. It's a quick tag, it's good for me. It's been harder and harder to film lately, but anyways, today's tag is called Only One Deck, and this was created by Jay over at Iridescent Tarot. And it's basically the idea of if you could have only one tarot deck and one oracle deck, what would those be, right? And how do I phrase this? I have to admit I was almost hesitant to do this tag only because I don't know what fantasy world you'd be living in where you could only have one deck. You know what I mean? Even people with the smallest of collections and spaces or situations probably has at least two or three or you know what. So it was kind of hard to make this choice and to even film it and to even think about like one tarot, one oracle. Just like Jay had in her video, I don't remember. I will show runner-ups, but that's about it. But we will just get quickly into the first bit here. When it came to thinking about a tarot deck, for some reason, my brain said, well, if I could only have one tarot deck, theoretically, I would want it to be mass market in case I used the shit out of it and had to get a replacement copy, right? It would have to be something that I could pretty much use for any person because if you're only allowed to have one tarot deck, you want to be able to read for multiple people, right? Not just yourself. Like if you're doing client readings, you're doing a bunch of things, whatever it is, you would want a deck that can do them all. And you also would want a deck with versatility and maybe some study aspect to it and all that jazz. So I thought to myself, what deck would I theoretically have? And I decided to go with this one. A lot of you who've been on my channel a while probably recognize this bag already. This is a Kelly Bear bag, but the deck in question is my copy of the Zerner Farber Tarot. This is the newer edition of this that's come out by Schiffer Red Feather. It has matte gold edging. These are the backs, very simple. And then the deck itself, right? The deck itself looks like this. And yes, this is a mass market deck. This deck has been around a while. This deck has had a few different versions. There's been versions with colorful borders. There's been versions of this deck with just white borders. Now, as you can see, this deck is borderless. Looks like this. Really like close up of the insides of this deck. And this deck has a lot going on. So that's why I decided if in some fantasy universe where I could only have one tarot deck and I had to start over and it wasn't like how I originally started with tarot, I decided I would go with this one because there's a few things, right? Besides the fact that it's mass market, this deck is what I would kind of call a hybrid tarot, okay? When you look at the guidebook, a lot of the meanings, in my opinion, align more to RWS. But then when you look at the cards, it has some things that lean towards maybe Thoth-ish, kind of in the minors. But then it also does its own thing where it literally renames like the cup suit to hearts. So it does a few different things, right? This is a deck that doesn't want to really be labeled. It kind of goes its own different direction, 5 other places. It's a hybrid, right? Like, again, this is like probably what most would consider more either Pippish, Marseille, Thoth looking in some of the minors, but then it's like at other times it's not. It's just, I don't know. This is just a very different deck. So I feel like its guidebook alone too, because it's very big, has a lot to study with. So if I was only allowed to have one deck, I could study a lot with this. I could read for a variety of different people with this deck. I could have read in a variety of different styles with this deck. I could have done it all, basically. And something about this deck too feels very ancestral. I think it's the quilted patterns. It's the textile feel of it. It feels like something that I don't know, like if either my grandmas were not extremely religious and otherwise, they probably would have had this deck. You know what I mean? It's just very, very old school. And so this is why this would be the deck. I think that if I could only have one tarot deck in some alternative universe, this would probably be the one that I would have. Now, in comparison, I guess, there is also what deck I guess I was my runner-up. And nobody should be surprised. That is the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. I've edged it myself. These are the backs. Okay, like if you compare how different these are, obviously this has more esoteric, whatever, like traditional meaning. This deck is leaning so far in the other direction. It is ridiculous. But the reason why you would say, well, the Raven's Prophecy, right? It was your first tarot deck. Wouldn't you want that to be your only tarot deck? And you always talk about how much you like it. So wouldn't that be your only tarot deck? And you're right in some ways. Like if I had decided never to get another tarot deck again and just had this one from the very start and it was all fine and dandy and good, I probably could have just kept having only the Raven's Prophecy. But there's a couple reasons why I didn't pick it as my only deck. The first is that while this deck has an excellent guidebook, right, I wouldn't pick this as my only deck now, because if you don't know already, this deck is basically going out of print. Raven's Prophecy now is, yeah, it's going. Llewellyn decided to, they decided to make it go out of print. It's not on their website anymore. I think you could probably still get copies of it through, I'm assuming, places maybe like Barnes & Noble, used deck websites, maybe whatever last copies and shit are on Amazon. I have no idea. But they're not carrying it anymore on their own website, right? So Raven's Prophecy is gone. So in that sense, if I had kept going, you know, eventually I would destroy this deck. If I wasn't more precious with it, if I wasn't using it less than I used to use it, this deck, I wouldn't be able to anymore. And then what would it be the point? If you can only have one deck, you don't want it to be an out-of-print deck, right? You don't want it to be, realistically, you do not want it to be an out-of-print deck. Because then, as soon as that deck is destroyed, you are at step one again. You have to find a new one. So that was kind of my idea, at least for a tarot deck. Now, the thing with me with oracles is I guess I'm not as precious with oracles in some ways, or I'm not as, I don't use oracle as frequently as I do tarot. Or if I do use oracles, I only use them usually for like one card bits at a time, or sometimes I'll do more, but I don't always pull multiple and stuff. So I feel like oracles at least would be safer. I was not as wanting it to necessarily have to be a mass market, which is why I chose this deck. If I could only have one oracle deck, it would have to be the Coastal Curiosities. As you can see here, I have, and I'm going to just show from the second edition. If you have the mini, which I also have, or the pocket size, whatever it's calling itself these days, that is the same deck as this. Okay, exact same, it's just in a small size. And I think there's still copies of it. I'm not too sure. But this would be my only oracle deck. And it would go, of course, with the Zerner Farber. These two decks, you guys have heard me talk about it. They actually do go really well together. So that was another thing I considered. If I could only have one oracle deck, I would have to go with the tarot deck that I picked. And this would definitely be the one for me. The keywords in this deck are very expansive. The images on this are very expansive. You guys have basically heard me wax poetic about this one. So if I could only have one oracle deck, it was obviously going to be this one. again, this is, I feel like this is not like a crazy choice there, right? It's pretty obvious. This probably would have been my only one. But if I had a runner-up, okay, if I couldn't have Coastal Curiosities or whatever it would be, but I still needed a deck, say, in this alternative universe that would go with the Raven's Prophecy, right? Since the Raven's Prophecy was my runner-up, I would probably just have this Oracle. This is Seasons of the Witch Mabon. And you might think that's a crazy choice. You're like, well, what the fuck? These decks are, like, seasonal, you know? These decks are... There's a lot of them. So how do you decide? How do you pick? But for obvious choices, looking at the edging here, looking at the backs of these, my aesthetics in general, this would be the one deck. If I had to only have one Oracle deck and my runner-up, right, with my runner-up, and I only had runner-up Raven's Prophecy, then I would only have Mabon. This would fit. This deck and that deck work really well together. And I don't care that it would be out of season because the messages on this are extremely powerful. The guidebook of this one has really good spreads, you know, to work with. It would be really great for shadow work with the Raven's Prophecy. And so those are the things I consider. It's like, how do these two mesh together? How would they coexist? Could I pull this deck with the Raven's Prophecy and have it in a reading? Could I read with this deck for multiple people in every situation? The answer is yes, right? There's nothing in this deck that could flag somebody necessarily. Some of the images are a little more confronting, but it's nothing too crazy. I don't think it's in a way that would like viscerally offend anybody. And that's also something I considered when I thought of like, well, if you could only have one deck, you kind of want it to be a little more palatable if you're trying to reach a wider audience and such. But anyways, this was always meant to be a quick little video. This is a quick little tag. You're literally just saying your favorite, like if you can only have one tarot and only one Oracle and maybe your runner-ups. So that is it. If you are watching this long, I mean, this was a very quick video, so I hope nobody was clicking away. I understand if you do, but anyways, if you're watching this long again, thank you so much for stopping by. Glad to see you, and I will be back again next time. Bye.